What is your relentless goal? It should be a goal that fuels you, something that you truly want, and maybe it even scares you just a little bit. I want you to write that down and know what it is and then own it. And then run after it every single day, every hour of every day if needed. And that is what a friend of mine calls reckless abandon. Hello, hello, hello. You are listening to your weekly private training for those who get it, the ones who aren't afraid of success, money, or growth. I am your hostess with the mostest, Jennifer Bleam, and welcome to podcast number 14, Reckless Abandon. A friend of mine shared this story a couple of weeks ago, and I knew that I needed to share it with you because it was so inspirational and even made me a little bit emotional. So, he was sharing the story of a family that he knows, and the oldest kid in the family is 5 years old, and he is absolutely fearless. And so he surfs, he rides BMX bikes, he plays every sport. He's very, very good at them. He's bilingual. He knows everything about every Star Wars character ever created, builds Legos. And so this one day, he decides that he wants to take up skateboarding. And so his parents start to take him pretty regularly to a skate park. He's discovered by this skateboard coach, and things are going phenomenally well. But the great thing is that this boy who is incredible set his sights on this goal as a 5-year-old to become a phenomenal skateboarder, and he is nailing it. He doesn't really know what success or failure means. He just knows that he wants something pretty badly, and he goes at it with reckless abandon. So that's what I want to talk to you about is reckless abandon. And do you have a goal that you are pursuing relentlessly and with recklessness? And it's no irony that we are also celebrating today in the States Martin Luther King Jr. Day, because he also had a goal that he pursued with reckless abandon. He was relentless in his dream and in his goal. He was relentless and he pursued with reckless abandon, standing up for what he believed, taking huge, massive action towards achieving that goal. And so I want to talk to you about that today. And I'm tying together Martin Luther King Jr.'s life with your goal and what I hope you will start to pursue with reckless abandon. So, what can we learn from the life of Martin Luther King Jr.? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is this inner critic, because most people have an inner critic or a bratty child or an inner voice or that voice in your head that when you're tired or discouraged, that inner voice tries to take control and hold you back. Now, I can't look historically and prove to you that Martin Luther King Jr. had that inner critic, but most people do. So it would not be too much of a stretch to believe that there were days that he was tired and discouraged and maybe just didn't want to get up in the morning. Maybe he was just under the weather a little bit, a scratchy throat or an upset stomach or just a little grumpy because someone treated him poorly. But he never stopped. He did not let that negative voice take control of his life. He controlled that inner voice and probably fueled it into some of the speeches that we know today. So that is point number one, is I want you to start to control your inner critic. Now, number two, he knew what he wanted. And I hinted at this in the introduction, is that you need to know what you want. I was coaching an MSP last week or the week before, and we were chatting about his goals for his business. And he was not crystal clear on exactly what he wanted. And he had said several times that he wanted a $5 million business, but his actions just didn't align with that statement. And so I challenged him a little bit and I said, listen, you either are lacking in self-discipline, or you simply don't actually want that $5 million business that you keep saying you want. So we need to get crystal clear on whether or not you really do want a larger business, or if you want a comfortable lifestyle business that is easy to run and easy to grow just a little bit year over year, and that pays you fine. And that's okay, but you have to know what you want. And so that is lesson number 2 from Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. He knew what he wanted. He was crystal clear. And so that leads to number 3. What he wanted was pretty crazy. Okay. No one had ever seen this before. Nobody had ever seen equal rights. No one had ever really even imagined freedom. And so, if the negative voice and his critical thought wasn't enough to stop him, and maybe his friends even thought he was a little bit crazy, which we'll talk about in number 4. Number 3 is that he always took massive action. He knew that in order for this crazy idea called freedom to happen, that it would not just take little incremental changes, but that it would take all in massive action. Now, Grant Cardone has a phenomenal book called The 10X Rule. If you are a reader, I highly recommend that you read it. If you're an Audible person, use Audible and listen to it, or at least grab a synopsis or do a couple of Google searches on, grabbing a synopsis of the 10X rule. Because inside of that book, Grant Cardone talks about how so many people set average goals. Average goals are the ones that you can kind of create a spreadsheet and you can say, okay, if I'm, at point A today and I just make these incremental improvements every day, I'll be able to get to point B by the end of the year. And that's how average goals are set. They are goals that you know how you are going to get from point A to point B. But his point is that almost everybody is driven enough to achieve average goals. So setting an average goal and then achieving them is really just an artificial exercise in making yourself feel better, because those average goals are just going to happen anyway. But what about when you 10x your goal? What if you 10x your goal and then you know that in order to achieve that, you are going to have to 10x your effort? That is when you know that you are thinking of above average goals. And Martin Luther King was setting above average, insane, crazy goals. And that's what you want. So that is point 3, is that Martin Luther King set crazy goals. Now, inside of his book, Grant Cardone says, never reduce a target. Instead, increase actions. When you start rethinking your targets, making up excuses, and letting yourself off the hook, you are giving up on your dreams. So, man, doesn't that tie into Martin Luther King Jr.? Because he was all about having a dream. So, Grant Cardone says, don't reduce your target. Instead, increase your actions. Don't let yourself make excuses. Don't let yourself off the hook, because what you're doing is saying, my dream isn't important anymore. And that is never true. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is haters. Haters gonna hate, right? And it's that thing that we don't want to think about because we are so conditioned to want external approval. But the reality is that when we start to take massive action, you are going to attract those people who start to say, who does he think he is? Or who does she think she is to try to do that crazy thing? Man, why doesn't she go for something more safe? Why doesn't he think of a more achievable goal? You can always start on something crazy later. And to that, I would say, haters gonna hate. You do you. Or in the world of racing, we always say, your race, your pace. And so here is an action item for you this week. I want you to write down and document and put somewhere that you can see what is your relentless goal. What is the goal that gives you absolute fuel and excites you and gets you out of bed in the morning? What is that goal that you truly want? And again, it might just be a little bit scary. That's good. That is a sign that you are thinking outside your comfort zone. You are thinking above average. And I want you to write that down and own it and run after it every single day. And that is what the friend of mine calls reckless abandon. Like that 5 year old that doesn't understand what is success and what is failure. He just knows he wants to be a skateboarder. So let that 5 year old serve as a lesson to all of us to chase our goals with reckless abandon. That's it for today. I'll chat with you next week.